Okay, here's a new and interesting look at the field of genetics. And it shows you humanity's forgotten return to Africa is revealed through DNA.
One of the groups that a lot of Europeans have been trying to steal and put into their ranks is the Khoisan. And the reason for this, of course, is because they prove the out of Africa theory. They prove that Africans are pretty old in the world, and they're one of the most continuous tribes in the world. And remember, they fall out of the torrid zone, so they should be part of the higher classes. And of course, they're light skinned, which is easy to tell because they live very far away from the equator. But still, they're black people and their skin is pretty dark compared to a lot of people around the world. But we will see in this video that this person will try and twist the evidence so that it matches what he wants it to say.
People have wondered how you get so many different odd African populations that are slightly different from each other. For a long time, we'd always thought that it was maybe just, being separated over time. Indeed.
So over here, we have at least three of the groups that are represented in Africa. And yes, it is true that people have been arguing for a long time. And obviously, some people made up their conclusions a long time ago. Let's see. So we've got a Zulu person, a Khoisan person in the middle, a, or let's say Dinka, another Nilotic, a South African, I would say, and then someone with albinism, another Khoisan person, a Cushitic person, and then a Himba, which is a Bantu person. So that's probably about four groups, and it pretty much represents all of them. Now, the diversity, as you can see, cannot be explained away easily by just saying some level of mixture from outside of Africa. In real life, it's because Africa is one of the most diverse places in the world. I mean, look at the differences. If you just take the top three. At the top, you have the Khoisan person, you have the Bantu woman who's mid-tone, and then you have the dark-skinned Dinka. All three of those people live in Africa, yet they represent such different appearances. If you go to the bottom, the very bottom, in the middle, you see the Cushitic person who obviously there's a back migration there to some of the people in Ethiopia, which is what's going to be in this conversation. It's a very important conversation because, again, white supremacists try to twist this information. Now, remember, the person I'm listening to spent so much time obsessing that black people really only exist in West Africa.
That's what we felt like made Mongoloids and Asians and things like that somewhat. But that's not necessarily true. We found that out a long time ago. Looking into this, you can see these Khoisan people here and how they're a little more yellowish skinned, a little more high yellow kind of looking, if you will.
So I want to point out quickly because there's a myth going around the world, and I don't know why, but there's a myth that if you're light skinned, that's proof that you're mixed, which is not the case because in Ethiopia, there's some people who are mixed with Eurasian DNA, but they're darker than Khoisan people. Also in Nigeria, you find people who are quite light skinned, like the same color as the Khoisan people. Maybe the Khoisan are just a little bit lighter, especially the most lightest Khoisan people. But still, you find people who are pretty light skinned in Nigeria, in different parts of Nigeria. You find this also in Congo. You find this in different places of Africa. You can find people who have very light skin, but are still 100% Black Africans. So, this idea that, oh, yeah, they're Khoisan, therefore their skin color is completely different than the rest of Africa, it's not a fact.
compared to maybe say the darker ones that are back here that are even admixed, but yet you can see how much darker they are. And these people spend a lot of time out in the sun, so they would get about as dark as possible, and these don't get that much darker. His forearms aren't much darker than the rest of his body in any way.
It is important to point out that they are under the sun, but we must remember that the sun that is in the torrid zone in the equator is way tougher than the sun that's in South Africa. In fact, again, I will say this again. There are some teachers who came from Nigeria and they teach in South Africa. And when they were teaching here, all of the South Africans, when there was when there's a little bit of heat, they would take off like their jerseys and stuff, and they're like, "Damn, it's hot." And the Nigerians are fully they're wearing jeans, they're wearing jean jackets, they're still wearing hats. It's like clearly there's a difference in terms of heat tolerance between South Africans because South Africans live very far away from the equator.
I'm not sure if he took off his pants, if it would be that much lighter. If she took off her garments, if she would be that much lighter. They're all
Well, that's kind of strange. Why would he have to take off his pants to become lighter? What the hell is that? And then he said if she took off her garment, why? Her skin is all over her body from head to toe.
very much lighter and very much about as primitive as they were when they were found and as thousands of years ago, except for they have more modern sandals you can see now, and some of them, though, these are all barefoot.
So we need to cover something here. So the Khoikhoi, who are basically all eradicated, I mean, I'm sure there's some left, but these people were living in the same way that a lot of Bantu people were living. So they did build with stone a little bit. They did do the people who are left over are the San people. The San people are the people who sort of refused, even in front of other technologies, to transition away from their traditional way of life. So you can see here the Khoikhoi have cattle. This is very different than the San. They in some images, but I can't find it now, they're seen wearing gold. There's entire books with the Dutch where they basically some of them transitioned into middle life. So in other words, life like that of the Europeans. So they had places like that of the Europeans. So again, the people that he's showing and the people that a lot of people show is people who still live in the tribal way. It's very simple for people of Khoisan heritage to live in the modern day. And of course, they did, as we have talked about in many times. This is why some of the images I've shown are of Khoisan people. And I will admit that, when they're not living under the sun, they get really light skinned, like to the point where they get like incredibly light skinned. Now, to be fair, because a lot of Bantu people have mixed with these people, I know people in my family who look like this, by the way. I don't. I'm a little darker than most of them, probably because I'm a guy. But there's a lot of other people who look like this, and I have cousins who look like this. This is a very typical South African look now.
And well, she's got modern sandals on. I guess that's where I noted it at. She's got the Velcro fold over kind of sandals and stuff. But so let's look at this. Call it humanity's unexpected U-turn. One of the biggest events in history of our species is the exodus out of Africa, or the out of Africa theory, some 65 to 70,000 years ago. The start of Homo sapiens' long march across the world. Now, a study of southern African genes show that unexpectedly another migration took Western Eurasian DNA back to the very southern tip of the continent in the Cape some 3,000 years ago.
So this part is an absolute lie. Let me tell you why. First of all, this information would be international news. If we found out that white people had gone to the Cape 3,000 years ago, so that's 1000 BC, that would be international news. People are still disputing whether or not Albuquerque, when he discovered that the Indonesians had plans of the Cape, if they had gone there, and we're talking about somewhere around 600 AD, things like that. So 1000 BC is not it. Now, I will say why he is being mistaken. He's mixing a couple things together here. And in fact, some of the studies to their um to their hey, I guess, infamy, they repeat this information that is incorrect.
According to conventional thinking, the Khoisan tribes of southern Africa, who we just showed, have lived in near isolation from the rest of humanity for thousands of years. In fact, the study
So while it is true that the Khoisan were isolated for thousands of years, that's kind of why they kept their culture. And remember, the reason how you grow in technology, and this is a very important point, is one culture creates, another one creates, another one creates. If you have an isolated community, then the technology cannot really grow that far because it's isolated. That's why some of the most amount of technology does come from that sliver of region, because there's so many groups who develop technology and then they clash. And then of course war is another reason for technology growing. And if you don't clash with each other, there's not a lot of wars. Now there's not a lot of people in general in the Khoisan areas. It's large land, small tribes. Even when the Europeans got there, some of the tribes maxed out at about 1,000 people. Now some had 30,000 or whatever, but again, we're talking about small tribes here compared to the 5 million that existed in ancient Egypt.
shows that some of their DNA matches most closely people of modern day southern Europe, including Spain and Italy.
At this point, this is so silly that it's actually just hilarious. So there are many DNA tests that have been done. In fact, this one that I'm citing right now, they tried to bring Chinese people, they tried to bring American whites, which is dangerous. You should bring European whites because American whites have black DNA. And they try to bring a lot of other people because, of course, the way, Khoisan people look, you have to do the DNA and you have to check, like, is there another reason why they look the way they do? Is it because of some Asian admixture? You'll be surprised to figure out that they are nothing close to any of the Europeans that he mentions at all. They are nothing compared to any Europeans. Instead, they are an isolated population. And as mentioned before, there are many other Africans who have been admixed with Khoisan people. And if there was a Eurasian component, that Eurasian component would have showed up on those Bantu people as well, because they're mixed with these people. And you can visually tell too. You can see it when you look at the person. You remember I played that woman who sort of looked Khoisan, and she did a DNA test, and all of it came back as Black African, not even a drop from anywhere else, even though she was like extremely light skinned.
And it's been noted for a long time that they're one of the only African species that were thought of as being a
Well, firstly, they're not a species, and also there's an easy way of explaining why they're light skinned without going too far, which is they live very far away from the equator, isolated away from the equator for a long time. Now, obviously, they did move around Africa a little bit for a while, which is probably where the dark skin color comes from.
separated and untouched type of thing, yet they have mustaches quite frequently, and facial hair altogether is really not a an African or a Negroid thing.
So his second proof, which is hilarious, is that Africans generally don't have like giant beards like you see in the Middle East and Europe. And therefore, because the Khoisan can grow mustaches, that's proof that they're actually of European stock. Besides the fact that they have literal like coiled hair on their head and brown skin, you would think that he would like, abandon this useless theory. This foolish mission is not going to get him anywhere, but instead he moves forward with it as if he's got some real point. He's got nothing. So of course, as you know, Africans can grow beards pretty quickly. The difference is the type of beards that Africans grow. Because their hair is not wavy, it doesn't appear to be as big. But obviously, if you stretch it out, you'll realize that the beards are just as big as those in Eurasia. It's just that our hair is coily in the same way that our hair afros, they're not small, they're just coiled up. If you grab one and you pull it up, you can see that it's pretty long.
So much they get patches around on their face and their jowls, but they don't. They do get mustaches quite frequently, like you saw in the picture. Let's look at him real quick, and you can.
So first of all, this mustache theory is nonsense. I had a mustache by the time I was 13. Like when I was 13, I had a mustache. And most other men that I knew had a mustache by the time they were about 17, 18. And if you look anywhere in Africa, anyone who's like 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, it's very difficult for them not to have a beard as a man. Any of those ages, it's almost impossible for them not to have beards. They shave with a razor at first and then clippers later when technology came. And shaving was a huge thing because of how often beards grew. And some of them are really large.
See, he's got a good mustache going on and stuff. And a lot of the Admix ones in America and Admix now today, of course, do get this same type of um, facial hair type thing, but it's not normal. If you look at the non-ads mixed over there, they get very little facial hair at all.
This man is dreaming. Africans, first of all, men in general around the world have facial hair. It's kind of what separates them. This is called sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism, of course, is the separation between men and women. This is why you don't find a lot of species outside of humans attractive as a human being, because you can barely tell the difference between the males and the females. Think about it. As a male, if you're straight, as a male, another male is still human, but you don't find them attractive. Without the sexual dimorphism, then there is no attraction whatsoever.
Um, in fact, very little body hair at all. Um, because Eurasian people also carry traces.
The body hair point is kind of correct, but it's not that they have little body hair as much as their body hair doesn't grow as large as the European or Middle Eastern and Asian people, where you can see their hair. You can see it from a while back. In fact, I know that a lot of European, Middle Eastern women have a lot of hair on their arms and legs and stuff like that. Whereas, the men in Africa don't even have that a lot of the time. I mean, I don't. And it can be pretty easy to spot on females of Eurasian stock because they'll have jet black or brown body hair, but then their skin color is pale, so it's easy to spot.
Of Neanderthal DNA, the finding also shows for the first time that genetic material from our extinct cousins, the Neanderthals, may be widespread in African Negroid populations.
So we don't even need a source for this one. This one is just made up. Neanderthal DNA, even though there is some of it in Africa, a lot of it comes from recent admixture.
The Khoisan tribes of southern Africa are hunter gatherers and pastoralists who speak unique click languages. They're the ones that have that weird popping whenever they talk. If you've ever seen So the Gods Must Be Angry, where the guy throws the
So it's called The Gods Must Be Crazy, not The Gods Must Be Angry. And yes, they do have what Europeans call the click language, or what we call language. And then they have these cliques, quote unquote, which are there present in other African peoples as well, probably due to influence. There are some people who say the pygmies made it up, but I don't believe that at all. I believe they were influenced. They're too close to them for them to have made it up. And then, of course, you have Bantu people like the Nguni people who have picked up the cliques.
Coke bottle down and it bounces off the guy's head and he thinks it's some kind of magic thing, and they go through the whole movie of it, and it's all just a parody kind of thing. It's actually kind of hilarious. I bet though now it's looked at as being politically incorrect and racist, even though these people still are there, and if a plane flew over they'd feel almost the same way about it.
So I hate to tell you, but first of all, everything you're saying doesn't make sense. First of all, you're right. It was a movie. That means it's fake. The people in that movie were actors. In other words, they lived in the modern world. They got paid for their scene. They didn't live like that at all. Um, Thirdly, what you're saying doesn't even make sense. Like, if they saw a plane, there's planes all the time in South Africa. These people are used to them now. I hate to spoil it for a lot of people, but a lot of these tribes go to shops. Like, they have money, they keep them in their huts and stuff like that. They go to shops, they buy bottles. They've been doing that for a good, at least since the 1900s. Like, they're not tribal in the same way that they used to be in, the 1600s. Very different scenario. They would know what a Coke bottle is, and they've known since Coke was a thing. Also, South Africa is not the same as other parts of Africa, which could be more isolated, maybe in a bush. Here, it's very easy to access these people. If I wanted to, I could go access just about any of them.
Um, Anyhow, the Khoisan tribes of southern Africa that are hunter gatherers um, have this unique click language and an extraordinarily diverse gene pool split from everyone else's before the African exodus, way back when, that they were a separated people, like the Nubians are totally separated and really not related to any of the West Africans at all.
Well, it really depends what he means by separated, but maybe around 10,000, 20,000 year ago separation that didn't come together for a long time, but maybe came together through the Nilo-Saharan chain. Hausa people and all these other people are both. But yes, there is a separation that did happen. And again, there's people who've done the DNA tests on Khoisan people, and they are some of the most isolated African tribes and most continuous in Africa. But no, genetically, they are not 100% separated from Black Africans. In fact, they're most closest to other Black Africans.
So are these Khoisan. Now, these are very special isolated populations carrying what are probably the most ancient lineages in human populations today, are the most archaic. Says David Reich of Harvard University, for a lot of our genetic studies, we have treated them as groups that had split from all other present day humans before they had split from each other. But this looks like it goes way back before, and the split must have happened far, far back, around 1.2 million years ago, and that we have no common ancestors from there, and that
It's funny how what he's reading literally mentions the 30,000-year-old um, out of Africa migration, and he's just jumping to conclusions. We don't have a common ancestor past 1.2 million. Bruh, stop making stuff up. You're just sitting there making stuff up for no reason now. Also, again, remember, because some people don't remember this. Like, this is this is what they want to believe. They want to believe there's this huge isolation between, I mean, West Africans, really. Somehow that's like the big hate. And I've noticed it around the world. It's like when people say, oh, there's a giant beef between Africans and African Americans, and then 90% of the time it's like West Africans versus Americans. And then when people say, um, Africans came from West Africa, and again, they're just isolating West Africa, and then everything is almost always West Africa, and I don't understand what's their thing with West Africa, or like what's the big hate with West Africa. But notice, by the way, how he tried to separate the Nubians from West Africans as well. And now, in one of the most desperate ways, he's trying to separate South Africans from West Africans completely, which is not going to work because you're talking nonsense.
That's what makes the radical difference between the two of us. Other papers have shown this. I've had a couple of them recently. The
Don't you find it funny that this guy literally will try and debunk information by quote unquote Afrocentrists? They go, Afrocentrists are lying about Egypt, and then he's sitting here saying that human beings split from each other 1.2 million years ago. Like, your information is, at this point, it's basically fiction.
unexpected snippets of DNA most resembled sequences from southern Europeans, including Sardinians, Italians, and people from the Basque region. See the back to Africa, but from where? Dating
So we'll talk about why the DNA that has the very small, almost no DNA found in Khoisan people today, which has this trace, has got nothing to do with 900 years ago or 1,900 years ago. It also has nothing to do with the regions that he's talking about. All of it is almost Yemeni DNA.
methods suggest that they made their way into the Khoisan DNA sometime between 900 and 1800 years ago, well before a known European contact with southern Africa. So apparently there was contact running all the way up the Nile and meeting and through these people, are coming off the Horn people that met.
By the way, I want to talk about the bias that I've been seeing in mainstream history, where a lot of them, they're very open to the idea that when it's like um Levantine people, they can move all over Africa, right? They can move from Egypt all the way down to Ethiopia, all the way down through the eastern parts of Africa. But then when we say that Africans have been moving up and down that region, they do play this game of like, no, it was isolated. They couldn't move from one place to another. And it's a very disappointing thing to see when you realize that they believe this. And then extremists like this guy take it even further, and they say that again they were moving up and down, but it's because they were like white people. I am so confused by the nonsense that I'm hearing here.
With them somehow a long time ago. It's well known now there were Caucasians in the Horn of Africa, and some 40,000 years ago, the Hofmeyr site, which is down in the area that we're talking about.
So you will be shocked that the earliest that a lot of geneticists or whatever historians really put back migration from Eurasians is around 1,000 BC, which there might be, in fact, not even Eurasians, let's say Arabs, is around 1,000 BC in the Horn of Africa. And the reason why they put it to this area is because of people like the Sabaeans and people like that. And so there is a little bit of evidence, but again, it wouldn't have been unmixed people. Like if you went to Ethiopia at any point in time, you would not get there and then there's white people standing there. There's a reason why the people of Ethiopia are so dark, even the ones that are mixed. And if you look at Ethiopia, the mix is strongly Black African. And again, I'll say it, the earliest they put it is around 1,000 BC. The latest is somewhere around 100 AD and times like that, which we will get to that. Remember, it's even written there, back migration 3,000 years ago, not 3,000 BC, 3,000 years ago. That's 1,000 AD.
Also shows the same type of thing. Hofmeyr is literally right about here.
So here's where it gets interesting. He shows the map, and you can see that the 3,000 years ago is mostly isolated to the Horn of Africa. And then when you go down, they say 900 to possibly 1,800 years ago, which by now they've settled on possibly 900 years ago. Now, if you think about when is 9,900 years ago in your head, think about when 900 years ago is. It's, so let's think, it's round about 1,200 AD. But if you round it off, okay, let's see, 1,112 AD, round about there. And of course, this map is over exaggerating things. So you can see there around 1112 AD, intermediaries from the Cushitic areas. So intermediaries who are mixed from that area are moving slightly down. Now, this here, this Khoisan region, which they're putting, is so exaggerated, it's funny. We're talking about maximum 100 people who have this DNA. It's like small tribe of people. Most Khoisan people do not have the DNA at all. But of course, the question is, how did it get there 900 years ago? And the answer is, it didn't. It was in Africa 900 years ago, but it was in East Africa. It was in the Swahili coast regions 900 years ago, 1112 AD, which we've talked about already. And as people move, these intermediaries, in other words, black people with slight Eurasian DNA, which they picked up from Ethiopians who had Eurasian DNA, they moved slightly to the southern side. And by the time that they arrive in Southern Africa, by the time they arrive in places in Southern Africa to be able to bring the DNA, we're talking way later. These people might as well have come, in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. It's unknown. You can't tell by DNA because, of course, it's like, I'll give you an example. It's like if I had a kid, if someone had a kid, right, in 900 AD with a Chinese person, that DNA is from that era, 900 AD. If that entire tribe moves to Nigeria, it's going to look like in Nigeria, Chinese people got there in 900 AD. But what really happened is they moved from that first era. So maybe in East Africa somewhere, because we do have DNA of Chinese people landing in those areas. Now, again, we have to be very specific because Mota, which is a isolated DNA from Africa, had been discovered and shows that most people in East Africa were not mixed race. It would have been a very small amount of people who are mixed in Ethiopia at the time. And there would have been a small amount of people who were mixed in East Africa as well. A small amount of people mixed, well, nobody mixed, even in the date that they're providing, 900. They're just like giving a range, 900 to 1,800 years ago. Nobody mixed in 1,800 years ago in anywhere near the Cape regions. That's just not a thing.
And the Blombos Rock Cave is right down here. And both of those are showing Caucasian involvement, red ochre, and all these type of things.
So, for those of you that don't know, Blombus Cave is one of those caves that show multiple technologies existing very early in Africa, from beadwork, which might have symbolism to it, not just isolated, symbolic drawings on walls, spears, these hatches, which might represent something or might be used for grip, which is still a pretty neat technology, and several other technologies found in this region, which is why the Europeans want to claim it as if it's theirs, which is funny. It's literally in South Africa. It's got nothing to do with Europe, and he's trying to claim it. The study he's showing has got nothing to do with Blombo's cave. Blombo's cave is old as hell, and the thing he's showing at most is saying 1,800 years ago, which would be what, like 200 AD, 100 and something AD. But you can see that this guy is going out of his way to try and mix a lot of things together so that he can get this image of Khoisan being mixed. Which again, you'll hear a lot of this from people. Like they'll try to claim that Khoisan people are Europeans, until of course it comes to like helping them out and all of that. Then they go back to being Negroes.
And so they show that that probably is the evidence of it, although they would have had to come seafaring wise from around, like they're kind of showing here in this loop. And here's kind of an
Is this guy gonna lie about a graphic that is literally showing the information in front of her face? Let's see something. Okay, it says out of Africa 65,000 years ago, back migration 3,000 years ago, moving into Europe 40,000 years ago, moving into Asia 60,000 years ago. So you can see there that they're showing nothing of what he's talking about. Now he says seafaring. That's clearly land. Like none of it is seafaring. It starts literally from Ethiopia. I don't even agree with this paper, but it's pretty obvious what you're saying is made up.
idea of genetics, showing a return to Africa 3,000 years ago, long before European colonization. Now, way back when, whenever we were talking about the Caucasus Mountain ranges and the Black Sea area and these people that were all up in here, it wasn't just this blue dot they always try to put on. Whenever they show you the ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans, it shows you a blank.
I'm so glad he's disagreeing with the information, but again, he's lying. So you see that dot there is supposed to represent the Fertile Crescent, which is supposed to be Sumeria and places like that. Um, it does not represent Proto-Indo-European at all. Indo-European is way to the north in Russia. The place where he's pointing is closer to Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Persia, those areas. That's got nothing to do with Proto-Indo-European.
Blanket that runs out, not just these little arrows like boing, little arrows like boing, little arrows like boing. And so everybody thinks, oh, they all came from this one little mountain place. No, it's people that were centered around this mountain place way long ago.
But I don't understand. What were they like? They were like, what?
I was like boing, around the time of Neanderthals, and then after that they all spread out 40,000 years ago, making it all the way across through Europe. And 45,000 years ago, in reading with Neanderthals, at 38,000 years ago, we consider them to be modern humans. Cro-Magnons are considered modern humans.
So modern humans have existed for a better part of 200,000 years, but he's putting it 35,000 years ago because he's trying to say that everybody else at that time is not a modern human. He's trying to say Asians and all these other people, Africans, are not modern humans. Again, he's being ridiculous. Also, he's being inconsistent because he did this whole 1.2 million years ago thing that he did earlier.
By all lineages of the definition itself, that puts it to there. At some 60,000 years ago, all across and through India, and then the separations and differentials that go there, and then spread up into what would be Asia. But Caucasians and Asians and Mongoloids are extremely closely related. Now they show you.
I wouldn't say extremely closely related. As we can see, there are people who are more related to, but it has to do with the isolated tribes. There's a tribe in Africa, East Africa, where they're more related to. This is what makes it very difficult because of the back migration. So we know that there's a tribe that they're more related to in Africa somewhere, but we would have to trace it back to that tribe. Very small tribe left Africa and then populated the rest of the world.
Here that maybe this red line comes and jumps across the Red Sea and bypasses Egypt somehow and runs up, or it's more possible that they came out of down here, or even the Sumerian Strait that runs off Euphrates and came down, ran across the Horn, and all the way around and into there also.
It's quite obvious that it's the Sabaean population, which had already expanded from the Jewish Empire, which had already expanded from the Persian Empire, which had already expanded from Egyptian empires. So what you're seeing there in 1000 BC and later, I mean, 1000 BC is like the earliest they give it, but what you're seeing is a complete difference of what happened before that, where empires are forming in that general region. And of course, we must remember that Ethiopia took over parts of Yemen as well. And it was a back and forth migration between Yemen and those two places. Yemen's closeness to other parts of Asia means that other Asians are intermixed with them. That's why Jewish people, especially of Yemen, have black DNA.
Because through this here, there's a giant rift valley here of Lake Tanganyika, Lake Malawi, Victoria, and so on else. And it's kind of hard to get these two connected. It's not as hard as getting across the Sahara up here, but it's definitely hard to get those two connected. But you can swing through right about in this area. It looks like it'd be a fantastic place to come in. And just because they're here now doesn't mean that they weren't exactly where my thing is right now. And in fact, right up, oh, how about there? How about right there? How about my little tip pointer is exactly where they're, oh, right up against the water. And these people met right here.
That's very good guesswork, but where are the facts? By the way, I want to mention as well that what did they bring? Let's say they did come to those regions and they joined with the Khoisan people. What did they bring technology wise? Because as you mentioned, the San people, a lot of them still live like they did tens of thousands of years ago. So if those people came and landed there, what did they bring to that area? All the kingdoms that are in those areas are basically Bantu kingdoms, starting from Congo all the way to Great Zimbabwe. So what did they bring? And they have very good similarities with West African civilizations.
And then they went south into here. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that shows you this contact that we're speaking of.
No, there's little to no evidence of what you're speaking of. You're relying on one study, which does not even point to the region where you're pointing, but we will get back to that when we actually look at it itself, not from this biased point of view.
Anyhow, archaeological and linguistic studies for the region can make sense of the discovery. They suggest that a subset of the Khoisan, known as the Koe Kawadi speakers, arrived in southern Africa from eastern Africa around 2200 years ago. Koe Kawadi speakers were and remain pastoralists who make their living from herding cows and sheep. The suggestion is that they introduced herding to a region that was otherwise dominated by hunter-gatherers. So after the fall of Egypt and things, these people went south, probably because the people up north spread out trying to usurp anything they could out of that area. And
Now I'm getting real confused. Are you saying that the Khoisan people are genetically related to the people of ancient Egypt? Is that what we're doing right now? That they're continuous with the civilization of ancient Egypt? I mean, I know a lot of people are going to be very happy to hear that.
these people kind of pushed outward way came south. Now, Reich and his team found that the proportion of Eurasian DNA was highest in Koe Kawadi tribes, who have up to 14% of Western Eurasian ancestry. What is more, they looked at the East African tribes from which the Koe Kawadi descended. They found much stronger proportion of Eurasian DNA, up to 50% in some of the populations.
So again, this needs to be checked in deep detail because what he's talking about here is a blatant misunderstanding. But we'll talk about this in a deeper way. I just want him to finish before we sort of tear it apart a little bit. I mean, we've already been tearing a lot of it apart.
Usually as a blanket, they've talked about here recently being around 40%. Finding this new marker bumps it up another 10 or so, it seems. Other ones overlap. And what's odd about that is just African Americans here definitely have some Caucasian admix that they were given because of the Jewish slave masters. And it all
Oh, here we go. Jewish, huh? They're all a bunch. Oh my god, they love this thing of like pushing it on to the Jews. It was white people, brother. It was white people from all different parts: the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch. You telling me all of those people were just the Jews of those civilizations? The British? Stop playing. And then, of course, the Middle Easterners, who are not all Jewish. In fact, a lot of the ones that pushed slavery hated Jewish people.
All seems to correlate, and it all says it's like European, Eurasian. It's the same people, and they say, well, it can't be them because it's European. But indeed, this it comes from the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean people are now Europeans. They'll make a mention of this in here, I'm sure. Probably. Let's see. Um, the
So, by the way, before I give away what I'm going to say, I want to first start by saying keep in mind that no DNA was done on like the dead or anything like that. This is DNA on modern people speculating about the ancient world. But we'll get back to that.
that result confirms a 2012 result by Lucia Pignani Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute in Hixton, UK, which found non-African genes in people living in Ethiopia. Both of the 2012 study and this week's new results show that the Eurasian genes made their way into East African genomes around 3,000 years ago. About a millennium later, the ancestors of the Khoekhoati headed south, carrying a weaker signal of the Eurasian DNA into southern Africa. So it wasn't necessarily Caucasians that had done it, but Caucasian hybrids.
Caucasian hybrids. Come on. So obviously he didn't understand the study in the beginning, which obviously is saying that it's not a bunch of Europeans who went to Africa. It's people who were slightly admixed, which basically means their culture had nothing to do with the movement of these people. It had to do with the people who lived in East Africa, their decision to move. That's what it really had to do with. And there's a reason why it doesn't appear in more than what he's calling 15%. That's what they're saying in the study. Now, obviously, there's parts of the study that doesn't make sense. Like, for example, they're not taking into consideration that all of this admixture could have happened in Africa around the same period, and then they moved in recent times. As we know, slaves had been taken from Africa, from different places, from Ethiopia, from India, from all of these places. India is not Africa, but yeah, you know what I mean. And they were moved into this general region. And what you're getting as a signal from 900 years ago might be somebody from East Africa 900 years ago, but not from the Western side.
Or mulatto-ish people, like what the Ethiopians are necessarily now. And of course, now we're finding that that seems to be what was called Ethiopian back in the day, or the Kushites were up there, were Caucasians that became interbred with black people to a point and then taken over by them a lot more.
So, of course, the word Cushite has little to do with Ethiopia. It has something to do with old Ethiopia, the kingdom of Kush, and all those places. But the modern Ethiopia, it has little to do with it. There's only a correlation there because the people who lived there were generally the same tribes or generally the same language groups. So it's called Cushitic and stuff like that. But to be honest, it should be called some other name because Kush is something a little different. Kush is more Nilotic and stuff like that. So when I say Nilotic, I mean the language of the Kushites is Nilotic. It's not Afroasiatic. But then they have an Afroasiatic group called Cushitic, which is confusing because the Kushites did not speak an Afroasiatic language. Um, Worse than this, of course, is this claim that he's making that Ethiopians were these white people, which is ridiculous. Obviously, on the face of it, we've done DNA tests on old people, and none of them were Asian. What's even funnier is he proves this by saying that there's a back migration. By saying there's a back migration, it means they migrated into an area in Africa where there were already people.
admix came in, and then now that hybrid person came down and did this. The cultural implications are complex and potentially uncomfortably close to European colonial themes. I actually am not sure that there's any population that doesn't have West Eurasian DNA now, says Reich.
Oh, it's very similar to the themes of white colonialists. I wonder why. I wonder why it's so similar to that. Also, he says, I wonder. Yeah, they colonized the world. You're not even understanding that you're getting that signal from there as well. And again, I'll mention it. If you have people, black people, who fuse with Eurasians at a low level in East Africa, somewhere in East Africa, and then that person moves a little bit, and then he moves a little bit, and let's say by 1600s, 1700s, a very small amount of them have moved into that area, have moved into the Khoisan regions in the western side. You cannot pick up that that is 900 years ago or whatever. You're going to say it's 900 years ago when it's not. Now, of course, they're trying to throw the pastoralism thing, which, by the way, is not a confirmed fact, to, oh, it must be these mixed Ethiopian people who gave them uh, the type of cattle farming. But it's mainly from West Africa. That part is kind of obvious, proximity wise.
These populations were always thought to be pristine hunter gatherers who had not interacted with anyone for millennia, says Reich's collaborator, linguist Brigitte Packendorf of the University of Lyon in France. Well, no, just like the rest of the world, Africa had population movements too. There was simply no writing, no Romans or Greeks to document it.
So here's where the nonsense meter goes up for me. Um, so the people who moved into the eastern areas from Africa, and we know because there's several documents that talk about them, from Cushitic people, Egyptians, uh, East Africans who move and are documented by the Greeks and the Romans as moving into those regions. They've never found that DNA. Isn't that weird? They've never found that DNA, even though it would have been more numerous, it would have been more ancient, it would have been more collaborative. So, in other words, much more invited admixture in that area. They find not a shred, not a drop of that DNA in the areas there. Like, so from around really 2000 BC, you should be finding Cushitic DNA in those areas, but you don't find nothing. And the reason why you don't find nothing is because they don't want to find it. I mean, I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's because they don't want to find any of it. But somehow they can find like weird traces of Eurasians, which, by the way, remember when I said, because some people, they don't like to believe me when I say it, remember what I said, when DNA is all said and done, there's going to be no such thing as a black person. You saw with the Robert Saper video, they're already trying to sneak the idea that West Africans have Eurasian DNA. They sneak the idea that Cushitic people, so Nilotic, Nilo-Saharan people, have Eurasian DNA. They try to sneak the idea that Ethiopians have that, and then they say that East African Bantus have it, and then they say that now they're trying to claim that Khoisan people have it, although he is not reading it properly as well. This is claiming like 1 to 2% of the population. They're not claiming 15% or anything like that. And remember, these populations of Khoisan people, they were very small tribes back in the day. So the slightest amount of admixture would have spiked the entire thing, the results. But, we don't need to get into that. And so if you take all of these, let's take East Africa mixed with Persians. So now I'm just going with what they say. East Africa mixed with Persians. Horn of Africa mixed with Yemenite people, possibly Persians. Uh, West Africa, they claim again mixed with let's say Spaniard type people, including Arabs. Then they claim that some Bantus are mixed with. Remember the one we were talking about last time, the Congo and whatever they claim are mixed with the West East African Horn of African people as well, which is why they claim they look different. So Congolese people are mixed with that. And then they say that the Khoisan people are mixed with that. Now the question would then become, how can you do a true genetic test then on anything? On anything, how can you isolate African genetics? If every single African is mixed with Eurasian DNA, how could you ever isolate African DNA? What does it even mean to isolate African DNA? How come people who are Khoisan and people who are mixed with Khoisan, when they do 23andMe and all of these, they show zero Eurasian? How come most people in Africa come back with zero Eurasian DNA, no matter where they come from?
Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So I'm doing this video as kind of an introduction of myself, where I am, where I come from, maybe what I do. Um, I don't want to make it so long, and I'll make it in a special way because I want to share with you a little bit about who I am as a person uh, and what my DNA says about me. Um, so to start with, I am from Kenya. I was born in Kenya. Um, in a place called Embu. It's a small town near Mount Kenya. It's a beautiful place. It's always green. I love it. It's beautiful there. I just, every time I think about where I was born, I just like disappear in my, I disappear in my thoughts because it's such a beautiful place to be. Beautiful climate, always evergreen, flowing streams, and then when you wake up in the morning, you open your window, and if the weather is good, if it's not cloudy, you can see the peak of Mount Kenya with the snow covering the tops, the peaks. It's such a beautiful place, and I just like being there, and I'm so thankful that I was born there. But, every part of Kenya is really beautiful. Um, the central part with the highlands and all that, it's wonderful with the coffee and tea plantations and all kind of crops. It's a beautiful place. But if I can get it, there it is. It says I am 100% Elias. Elias is my name. I am 81 point, okay, I am 99.6% sub-Saharan African, 16.7% Northern East Africa. With this again, remember my heritage said I am about 14.5% Somali, which is like the Northeast Africa. And now here at 23andMe, they're saying Northern East Africa, I am 16.7%. It's almost similar percentages. And out of this 16.7%, I am 10.8% Ethiopian Eritrean. I don't know that, but I'm coming back to that in a while. And then 0.9% Sudanese, and then 5% broadly Northern Eastern Africa, and that's Sudan, Eritrea, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Somali, and then this Sudanese, where was it? Sudanese, okay, that's Sudan, and Ethiopia, Eritrean, okay, and they all for every region where you have some DNA, they.
A twist in the tail. There's one more twist to the tail. In 2010, a research team, including Reich, published the first draft of genome of a Neanderthal. Comparisons with the living humans revealed traces of Neanderthal DNA in all humans, with one notable exception: sub-Saharan peoples like the Yoruba and the Khoisan. Now, that made sense. After early humans migrated out of Africa around 60,000 years ago, they bumped into Neanderthals somewhere in what is now the Middle East. Some got rather cozy with each other, and as their descendants spread across the world to Europe, Asia, and eventually to the Americas, they spread bits of Neanderthal DNA along with their own genes. But because these descendants did not move back into Africa until historical times, most of this continent remained a Neanderthal DNA-free zone, except for North Africa, or right around the entire Mediterranean, always had it, and Egyptians show a higher amount than the common people do, by the way. It's strange, but that's probably because they kept their lineage so strong. Anyhow.
So you can see, obviously, that there are strong contradictions still happening in the Eurocentric circles. in that they want to still remain with the Neanderthal, being isolated away from Africa, but at the same time, they want to do this back migration thing. So they say, oh, no, 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 there was Neanderthal DNA. They use Neanderthal as an excuse to say, see, Egyptians couldn't have been Black African because we find Neanderthal DNA in some of the Egyptians, most of them being in that 2017 study. But then they'll go and say there was Neanderthal back migration already in Africa, which asks the question, then why wouldn't that be there anyway? Why is that proof of outside of Africa? It doesn't make sense.
Or so it seemed at the time. Now it appears that the back to Africa migration 3,000 years ago carried a weak Neanderthal genetic signal deep into the homeland. Indeed, one of Reich's analysis published last month found Neanderthal traces in Yoruba DNA. In other words, not only is Western Eurasian DNA ancestry a global phenomenon, it's also having a bit of Neanderthal living inside of you.
Again, there are some Black Berber tribes that are slightly mixed with your not Eurasian, but let's say they're mixed with the North Africans today, and then they move down into Africa, and a guy's black and another guy's black. You have no idea if that person has Eurasian DNA. You're not trying to isolate for that, and so they mate, and then some Yorubas who prefer the type of Fulani type thing, they start to get some of that DNA in them, and then all of a sudden they have that, and then these people take that to mean that the Yoruba people have some kind of back migration in there from back in the day, when it's really recent. A lot of it is really recent, and I guess that it's the same for a lot of these other places. Somehow they always guess very far distant for Africa. So like they'll always say like, oh, it probably got there thousands of years ago. But when they find it in Asia or Europe or any place like that, they'll be like, that happened like 50 years ago or something like that. They'll never trace it back to where it started.
Back to Africa, but from where? Well, Reich and his colleagues found that DNA sequences in the Khoisan people most closely resemble some found people who live today in southern Europe. That, however, does not mean that the migration back to Africa started in Italy or Spain, or that's where it came from. More likely, the migration began in what is now the Middle East. From what I said before, let's see if he clarifies. We know that Southern Europeans can trace their ancestry to the Middle East. However, in the thousands of years since they and ancestors of the Khoisan left the region, it has experienced several waves of migration. These waves have had a significant effect on the genes of people living in the Middle East today, and means Southern Europeans are much closer to the original inhabitants of the Levant than modern-day Middle Easterners. This was your Aryan population.
So the area that he's talking about is not Aryan population. The Aryans lived slightly to the north and the east. So he's absolutely wrong about that. The Levantines, though, it is true, are the ones, and I've said this before, that people from Greece and Italy, and they're Middle Eastern people. They think they're white, but they're actually Middle Eastern people. Their history, their culture, and all of this traced to the Middle East. It's got nothing to do with the rest of Europe. The rest of Europe looks nothing like that area. And again, its proximity to Egypt, its proximity to Nubia, proximity to those civilizations, that area, Turkey. That's what really made them jump in technology in the later years. It has nothing to do with being European. In fact, if you look at the rest of Europe at the time, it was nothing. Whereas Africa was already developing iron smelting and stuff. And we all know it's as the result of these people moving deep into Europe, bringing all kinds of people with them, that they start to bring greater technology. And people are going to say, bringing all kinds of people. Yeah, it's written. Go read the books. It's written where they say they brought black people to places as far as Britain, Keep in mind, by the way, this type of admixture is going to be respected by these people. But when it comes to the people that we found this year or last year who were in Uptown or any of those places in the UK, they're like, oh no, he's mixed. He's probably North African. He's probably like they're trying everything to do to try and make the person disappear, but they're going to respect this. Luckily, this is one of the few people I've heard actually cite this, to be honest.
That's no longer there. This is the thing that's been hidden about the Egyptian DNA. When it came out and it said that they were European type styles, it's because the current population doesn't have blue eyes, blonde and red hair, and they're not really these people. Well, who does it?
If you isolate white people to people with blue eyes, blonde hair, and light skin, you're talking about a really small amount. You're almost talking about nobody. And those people basically they did in terms of contributing to modern civilization, they basically did nothing for about the first, while civilization was going on, the first thousands of years. And then when it came to the Vikings, you start seeing a stronger contribution. But even there, the contribution is limited. I'm not saying they did absolutely nothing because every community in the world sort of contributed to modern civilization, but it was very limited up until that time. In fact, the Middle Eastern people call that place a wasteland.
Point out that they were the people of? Well, they're kind of like the people way up north and in Europe here. DNA shows you all this stuff. Proto Indo Europeans, they call them now instead of Aryans, and everything's just fine.
You can call them whatever you want, but they didn't really contribute that much to things. Like if you look at India, before Aryans got there, there was writing, there was all this other stuff. If you look at the Sumerians, before the Indo-Europeans got there, there was all these other stuff. If you look at all of these places before the Indo-Europeans got there, the Indo-European genetics did spread, the language did spread, but they really took over places that were already developed.
As long as you don't mention that it got ruined somehow from, oh, let's see, who ruined that? Oh, okay. That might explain some a little more to you. Anyhow, interesting find here. Khoisan, which were thought to have been untouched. These people.
So, by the way, I know some of you didn't watch my video where I showed you an isolated Khoisan people who were untouched in the recent studies. They're probably like, oh, why would he show us this? This is like not interesting information. No, it is interesting, so that when people talk like this, we can just show the study. So in 2026, in January, there was a study that came out that showed that not only was the people isolated, but they were isolated from any other Africans as well. So there's no Cushitic DNA. There's no DNA from Bantu, no DNA from West Africa, just plain sand DNA, Khoisan DNA.
People here, but they have a lot yellower skin. They have the melanin change too. That's different from the other people here. They're just like directly behind them and other Negroids, and a lot of the West Africans, of course. And so that shows a differential there.
I don't know if this guy's got like short term memory loss, but didn't you just mention that a lot of the Africans that you mentioned, according to you, have Western Eurasian DNA anyway? So why would there be a difference in color? If Ethiopians have Eurasian DNA, if Yoruba have Eurasian DNA, if East Africans have Eurasian DNA, then why would they look different because of Eurasian DNA? It's not making sense. Makes sense.
And they show you how it flip-flops and comes back and in and out of Africa. Now, there's been Caucasians found all the way through Central Africa, all the way up, all North Africa was always Caucasians, and then once the Sahara came in, it became pretty much a barrier they talk about. Like, share, and subscribe, guys, and enjoy. Anything else more comes out about this, I will let you know. Peace.
Anyway, these people just wish that they were Khoisan people, or wish I don't know what it is about Africa that these people they hate it so much, but at the same time they want us to be them. Like they want to be Mansa Musa. And then they'll be like, Mansa Musa sucks. And then they'll be like, oh, but he was a white guy and he was rich. And then they'll be like, Ethiopia, who cares about that technology? But Ethiopians are Caucasians. And then they'll be like, Khoisans, they're primitives living in, with flip flops. And then they'll be like, but actually, we are the Khoisan. It's like, what is this bipolar type thinking that they inhabit in their head? There's some weird, imagine yeah. I don't get it. I don't get it. If I remember, I will link the study with the Khoisan isolated tribe DNA that's done recently, which proves that the Khoisan were an isolated tribe. 2026 study, and I think something like 60 people watched it, which is amazing. But yeah, you can watch that if you want to get a thorough debunking of this video.